Welcome back, everyone. We're here at CPAC sitting down with Trevor Loudon, one of the top anti-communist writers in America. Trevor, real pleasure having you on.
Always great to be on, Josh. Thanks very much for having me.
So, Trevor, we're hearing about all these new policies. I've heard a lot of people say, the Democrats are not socialist. Yes, you have these socialist elements. Policies aren't socialist. What would you tell them?
Well, I'd say the policies are completely socialist. The Equality Act, for instance, which will basically strip people's First Amendment religious liberties away. I think that's about as socialist as you can get. Some of the economic policies, the Green New Deal that's coming in, that could be written by Stalin, easily. So the attack on gun rights, the attack on freedom of speech, all of it is deeply, deeply socialist. We are in a revolution right now.
Now, Trevor, I want to talk to you about the agenda, where we're heading with this. Let's start off with the Equality Act. Now, a lot of people have heard about it. They understand that maybe, the basic details, that it would make it so that, schools and universities and businesses can no longer discriminate against people based on gender preference and these things. This is how it's being portrayed. What's really in this?
Well, what this is an attack on freedom of speech and freedom of religion. Say you had a church, for instance, that was sort of traditionally Christian, and you didn't believe in gay marriage. You looked at the Bible and you thought, well, the Bible clearly states that gay marriage is wrong. That's your belief, right? So you get a homosexual couple comes to your church and says, look, we want to get married in your church. And you say, well, no, sorry, we can't do that because that's against our beliefs, our principles. Then you get slapped with a $5 million civil rights lawsuit from the Department of Justice. This is aimed at ending religious liberty in America. It's not judging one religion over another. Everybody's got the right to their own religious belief and to live according to their conscience. This will completely destroy that concept. It's over if this act is passed.
And you mentioned, too, it's an attack on First Amendment freedom of speech. How would it compel or restrict speech?
Well, you cannot, when you say you cannot discriminate against people with their gender orientation. Well, the definition of gender orientation has been made extremely broad by the LGBTQ movement, which is a left-wing movement. So even if you criticize that, even if you say, well, no, there are only two genders, if that's your belief, which is a pretty commonly held belief, I've got to say, it's been around for a long time, and there is a little bit of scientific basis for that. So even that would be illegal. To say that there are only two genders, that's exclusionary. That would be in contravention of the act. So this will be a complete muzzling of anybody who stands against the far left, communist essentially, LGBTQ agenda. This people need to understand the absolute seriousness of this. If they understood the implications of this, they would be marching in the streets right now.
Now, the other part of this new COVID-19 bill they're trying to put through, it's been discussed. There's some people saying it's basically a socialist wish list. What's the basis of that statement? Is this really a socialist wish list in this
Because
COVID
most
bill?
of it doesn't address public health. There's all sorts of pork in there of various schemes and socialist transformational policies. It's got the COVID-19 on the label, but it's well beyond anything to do with public health. And it basically takes away the ability to even argue that there may be better alternatives than what we've had pushed down our throats already. It will paralyze any opposition to the current agenda. And whether you agree with the current medical regime or not to deal with COVID-19, you've got to have freedom of speech because there's always somebody with a better idea. And when you think you have the best idea and nothing can ever be better and this is the way it must be, you're in a very bad path. Because history has shown us there's always somebody with a better idea, and the orthodoxy of yesterday is often derided as just silly. And it's gonna just totally retard our progress on the medical front and many other fronts.
Now, how does that bill actually restrict free speech when it comes to discussing, the virus and so on?
Well, it's basically going to say that there is an orthodoxy, and you cannot challenge it. It's going to enforce the current narratives, lockdowns, give the government much more power to enforce lockdowns, and we're already seeing now that doctors are being deplatformed, doctors are being fired if they question the current orthodoxy. Well, it's only going to strengthen that.
Another big thing, Biden's talking about this new, practical or common sense gun laws. And, he's talking, for example, about restricting magazine sizes, restricting ownership of what he calls assault weapons and, weapons of war, as he calls them. But, the concern is if they're going to restrict the ownership of these things, how can you have that restriction without actually taking them from people? And the other side is they're basically removing legal protections on gun manufacturers so people can go and sue them directly, meaning that gun manufacturers probably can't make guns anymore, which effectively means they're kind of, in a way, outlawing guns through this.
Well, that's exactly right. So, say you're a company that makes knives and forks for your kitchen table. You make spoons, you make knives, you make whatever. So somebody gets one of those knives, it's meant to cut up ham and eggs, and goes and stabs somebody. You can be liable for that under this kind of law. So you can make a legal gun, and if somebody commits a crime with it, you could be sued out of, a class action lawsuit against you, like they did with cigarettes. So this would end gun manufacture in the United States, which would effectively end the Second Amendment. And why was the Second Amendment put in the first place in the Constitution? The First Amendment was freedom of speech. What good is freedom of speech if you cannot protect freedom of speech? The Second Amendment was put in to have a check on the government so that if it went against freedom of speech, there was the government would fear the populace. They wouldn't take away freedom of speech because they knew the people had guns and could fight back. So this is going to completely destroy freedom of speech and freedom and the Second Amendment. This is totalitarianism. This is aimed at destroying your freedom of speech and the ability to defend your freedom and the ability to protect your family and the ability to protect your society, your friends, from from criminals and a criminal government.
A lot of people are really concerned about the executive orders Biden's putting through and the different policies already going through, because there are, as we've discussed, a lot of these, there are some very socialist policies in there, and people are pointing out this is just the beginning. Now, what's next? What is on the agenda? I know you've been studying a lot of these organizations that get behind the policies on this. What is the agenda of the far left that is infected, I think, the Democratic Party right now?
Well, they are doing shock and awe. They are loading every element of the communist agenda. Bang, 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 bang. We're going to get fully socialized healthcare, which will put everybody's healthcare in the hands of the state. They're going to make Puerto Rico, Washington, the District of Columbia into states, so that then they have they have 4 more senators, and you can never overturn their control of the Senate. They're going to do this massive change to voting procedures, so they can cheat at will. They're going to what was the other one? They're going to legalize 22 million illegal immigrants and give them citizenship and voting rights. Which means they will have a majority that cannot be overturned. Everything you would do to enact communism in America, they are doing. If Lenin was in the White House today, he'd be doing exactly what Biden and Harris are doing. There would be no appreciable difference. This is Leninism.
Now, I know a lot of people when we talk about socialism, I think economic socialism, they don't understand anything beyond it. And I know a lot of Democrats, they don't believe this is socialist in any way. They say it's just progressive politics. This is different. The democratic socialists are different from Lenin. You can't compare the two. What would you tell them?
The difference between democratic socialism and communism is about 5 years. That's what it is. It's just a step along the way. The Democrats have a plan to bring over 50% of the American landmass into government ownership within the next 25 years. Over 50% of the land in this country have it under government ownership. That's pretty socialist. And now they've got Deb Haaland who they're nominating for Secretary of the Interior, who is going to have control over that process. And the woman leading the petition to get her into that petition is Judith LeBlanc of the National Committee of the Communist Party USA. She's been engineered into that position by the Communist Party USA to oversee a massive seizure of land across this country. That's socialism.
And the other big narrative right now is, of course, the race narrative. They talk about, critical race theory, pushing that through. You have the new Secretary of Defense doing this internal purge in the military around critical race theory type policies. Yeah. How does race theory fit into this? I know people have talked about, for example, Maoism, that this is somehow tied to it. How would you explain this?
Critical race theory comes out of Mao to a large degree. See, the old traditional Marxism was the workers would rise up and take the wealth of the capitalists and then distribute it evenly. That's traditional Marxist, doctrine. That doesn't work very well in America because you don't have a very strong class structure in America. You're very socially mobile in America. You can go up or down very quick. Well, this critical race theory is Marxism applied to race rather than class. Because you can change your class in America, but you can never change your race. So the idea is the new critical race theory means the oppressed peoples of colour, rather than the oppressed workers, will rise up and destroy the capitalist Christian patriarchy. So it's completely Marxist, it's completely revolutionary, but applied using race rather than class. And this is being applied in the military right now to basically purge out any Trump supporter, any Southern good old boy, any white patriot, any Christian that might stand for the Constitution. They want a completely left-wing military that they can use to completely control this country if necessary.
And with a lot of these politicians getting behind these types of policies, I know a lot of people would say, well, they don't mean to do that. It's not their agenda. These are just Democrats, and there's of course pressure because people want this, racial equality. They don't really get behind these really extreme far left or communist principles. Do these politicians you're seeing really align with these ideas?
Look, the far left of the Democratic Party has taken over. The Congressional Progressive Caucus, which was set up by the Communist Party and Democratic Socialists of America, is the communist wing inside the Democratic Party. And that's nearly 100 members now. And they control a whole bunch of committees. So they are introducing Communist Party and Democratic Socialists of America Party, a la the Green New Deal, a la the $15 an hour minimum wage, the fracking bans, the critical race theory, the changing of voting procedures. They're following the communist line on packing the Supreme Court, for instance. They want to put 4 more justices on the Supreme Court, all left-wingers, to give them constitutional cover for everything they do. That is a communist-driven policy. The policy of Puerto Rican statehood and DC statehood. DC statehood that's been run by the Communist Party USA for 50 years now. This is Communist Party policy being pushed through the unions into the Progressive Caucus and is now becoming mainstream Democratic policy. But it is all communist.
Now, Trevor, if you were to kind of show this whole picture, I know from your perspective, you have an incredible view of all these different moving parts. Despite this, you stay pretty hopeful, actually, and we see now that there's a lot of grassroots movement happening now, as well as Trump himself coming out and announcing his new, interestingly, office of the former president, talking about community organizing, which I keep laughing about because I'm thinking like Saul Alinsky, Where do you see this heading, this new movement that's starting up to really hit the grassroots of this country?
Look, what we've got to do, we've got to be able to stall the communist Democrat agenda for the next 2 years so there is a meaningful election in 2022. And the two things have to happen. It's got to be a macro and a micro level. The first thing is the free states like Georgia, states like Florida and Texas have got to form formal alliances. You've got to form an alliance of free states. You know, you could have 15 or 20 states joining together, not secession, but as a bloc, stretching from the Florida Keys to the Canadian border, telling the federal government, we will do nothing unconstitutional. We will defy your unconstitutional orders. We have rights under the 10th Amendment to do that. So that's what's got to happen on the macro level, and it already is beginning. On the micro level, you've got to get the Tea Party movement, the Trump movement, grassroots Republicans, patriotic Democrats have got to form a grassroots nationwide network that can operate both in the Republican Party and the Democratic Party to primary out every radical leftist in both parties, and to promote MAGA candidates, you know, Make America Great Again candidates, patriotic candidates. We've got 80 million people who voted for the Trump agenda, the Make America Great agenda. That's the majority of the voting base. And we just got to organise it and do what the left have done by getting Ocasio-Cortez and Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar. The left worked inside and outside the Democratic Party to put their radicals into power. We got to work inside and outside the mainstream parties to put patriots into power, from county commission to the Senate to the White House. And the other thing we have to do is organise targeted boycotts against all the unpatriotic companies out there, and targeted boycotts supporting the patriotic companies out there. We've got to build a nation within a nation. The free citizens have got to band together within the nation to resist the overreach of the federal government, use the 10th Amendment, the legal protections the states have against the federal government, and work for more and more local sovereignty. We've got the majority, we've got the buying power, the economic power. We just have to get organised and use it to resist this Marxist power grab that's going on right now, while we still have time to do so.
Now, Trevor, we're at CPAC right now, and the theme this time around is America Uncanceled, right? This cancel culture is one of the big themes here. What is the real agenda behind cancel culture?
Well, it's the complete shutting down of free speech. You know, what did Hitler do when he took power? He shut down free speech in Germany. What did Lenin do? What did Mao do? What did Castro do? What do they do in North Korea? They have bad ideas which they enforce on people at the point of a gun. Their big enemy is free speech. If people have better ideas, their power crumbles. They believe they have a monopoly on truth. The Democratic Party and their communist friends believe they have a monopoly on truth, and that anybody who dissents is a splitter, a divider, a dangerous element. Cancelling means to shut us out of the public debate, shut down anybody with a dissenting voice. This is pure totalitarianism. This is the logical extension of the Marxist concept we have called for a long time political correctness. This is the absolute enforcement of the politically correct line, the absolute enforcement of Marxist ideas right throughout society.
And Trevor, again, just kind of going back, I think a lot of people, again, are really concerned right now. They're worried. They feel like the forces against them are overwhelming, and they feel a lot of pressure on their lives right now. They feel pressure from every direction, and you see a lot of hopelessness. You see a lot of concern. You see a lot of people getting depressed and demoralized.
Yep.
What would you tell these people who are feeling that way right now?
Well, demoralization is one of the key steps in a socialist revolution. You got to make the people feel there is no hope. There is no point in fighting back. There is no point. And when I use the word fight, I always mean peaceful fighting, right? I never advocate violence ever. You got to be very careful about that word in the modern context. But so they're trying to demoralize us. They're trying to do shock and awe so that we just go, wow, we can't fight this. But a lot of this is based on bluff. we are still the majority. The people who love America, the people who love God, the people who love the Constitution, the people who want the best for their families are still by far the majority in this country. They still have the most economic buying power. They still have the most votes. Their big idea is to get you demoralized. If they get you demoralized, you have won. Realize you have the majority. Realize we have right on our side, that we have God on our side, and if we fight, we can prevail. We still can prevail here. The only way we can lose this is if we give up, and that's what they're trying to make us do.
Now, Trevor, this last question, if you were to tell people one thing, whether it's, kind of what you're seeing, whether it's the kind of push to not let yourself be demoralized, and the facing the future we're going into, what would you tell them?
To always have faith and always be optimistic, but always be realistic. There's too many people living in delusion now. They think that there's going to be a military coup, that Trump's going to be restored to power, it's all going to go away. Forget that. No one's going to help us but ourselves. Well, okay, us and God, but we have to do our bit. We have to fight for the restoration of this country. But when we win it, it will be a very sweet victory, and it'll be a very long-lasting victory because we've done it ourselves and not had someone else do it for us. So I think the future is extremely bright, but we got to face reality first.
Okay, Trevor Loudon, real pleasure having you on Crossroads.
Thank you. Real pleasure, Josh.